All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. So my name is Allie, and I'm your host for this evening. And I am so excited to be introducing Candace Buford and Martha Brockenbrough here to discuss Candace's new novel, Neil. But before we get into the good stuff, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. As much as we miss having you all in the bookstore, it has been such a delight to expand this online program to connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. So I will be linking books in chat all evening, so it'll be super easy to find them. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in. All three of our locations are open, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in store. Or if you're not local, we do happily ship. And once again, we are so grateful for your support. So while you are over on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up in the next few months. And if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases, our online book clubs, and of course, follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. Speaking of social media, if you'd like to check out some of our past virtual events, you can find most of them on our YouTube channel, including this event within the next 48 hours. So if you'd like to see our other virtual events or share this one, go ahead and track us down over there. So we are here for about an hour. And towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. We'd love to know where you're from or your favorite latest read, but when it comes time for questions, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. So before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone of our commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of event attendees and guest authors. So in our chat and question spaces, please do lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. There are auto-generated closed captions available from the menu at the top or bottom of the screen. Select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. Finally, should any technical issues arise, we will work as quickly as we can to resolve them, and we appreciate your patience and understanding. And all right, I believe that that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce former Third Place bookseller, Candace Buford, here to discuss her debut YA novel, Neil, which is about a Black high school football star who takes a knee during the national anthem to stand up to injustice, making him a target in his small Louisiana town. In conversation this evening, I'm so pleased to introduce Martha Brockenbrough, author of 2 books for adults and numerous books for young readers, including Washington State Book Award winning The Game of Love and Death, Unprecedented, and so many other fiction and nonfiction titles, including the upcoming YA fantasy Into the Bloodred Woods. So thank you both so very much for being here. I am so excited to listen in on this conversation. If you need anything, of course, give me a shout, and that goes for everyone in the audience as well. I will be in chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to our authors. So welcome, both of you.
Hello.
Hello, and thanks, Allie.
Thanks, Allie.
Candace, here we are. I'm so excited.
Again. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start us off. I'm going to tell, we're here not in a bookstore, but surrounded by books and brought together by our love of books, even though the world has changed and we're still not able to do such things in bookstores. This is pretty great too, though. I see in the virtual space some people who don't live in Seattle, so glad to see you. I want to talk a little bit about Seattle and how Candace and I got to know each other. So we are incredibly lucky. When I was growing up, I didn't know any authors. Candace, did you know any authors?
I didn't. They were kind of like superstars, and
we both had dads who were doctors, right? My mom was a nurse, your mom also a doctor. And
Yeah.
so, we probably knew how one could apply a tourniquet, but not how to write books. And one of the amazing things about the Seattle area is that those of us who do write for young readers and illustrate for young readers, we do get together from time to time and we write together. Sometimes we'll have snacks and cocktails. And this was how I met Candace now a bunch of years ago. But right away, I knew she was someone I wanted to know. She is so smart and so inquisitive and just fantastic. And I think, Candace, I ran into you at third place. I think I was hosting Nick Stone's book event there, right?
Yes, that's right. But I think we'd met earlier, and I don't know if it was through like Mark Holtzen or somebody, but I'd actually, maybe I met you at your house.
I think the first time was at the house, and then we ran into each other at the bookstore, and that is when, and we had written together a couple times at the cupcake shop, but at the bookstore when I was there for Nick Stone is when you told me that you had not one but two books coming out. And I was so happy and so unsurprised. And it just felt right that it was, when we were there celebrating Nick Stone. So everyone who knows YA books knows who Nick Stone is.
Nick is.
And
Jackpot was her book.
You are the next. You are the next Nick Stone. Well, you're the first Candace Buford, which is just as important. But I really do think that you are writing in the fantastic tradition of Nick, of Angie Thomas, of Kekla Magoon, people writing about the most important issues, social issues that we're facing today, and doing it with style and intelligence and heart. And so without further ado, I wanted to, turn the stage over to you. Everyone, Candace is willing to read to us a bit from Neil. Are you ready to go? Ready to give us some context?
I'm ready to go. I don't know if you can tell, but like I am like swimming in copies of this book. They're like here, here, and here. It's amazing. So I am going to read an excerpt from the beginning. It's the setup of the book, and we open with Russ and his best friend and quarterback Marion, and they just got to his car, and Russ has a cardboard window. He's taped it up, tried to match the outer paint with his old Honda Civic, so it's like red tape. And Marion's making fun of him and saying he can't get in. He thinks it's going to break down. So here we go. I feel like this is going to fall apart. Raising an eyebrow, Marion paced the length of my car, which was his ride home several times a week. This can't be safe to drive anymore. He had a point. Older than I was, my hand-me-down Honda Civic had seen better days. With a broken window, leaky AC, and an engine that sounded like a freight train, it wasn't in the best shape. But it got me where I needed to go, and right now that was home. The road skirted the edge of the parish line between Monroe and Westman, the white town on the other side of the freeway. A passerby might mistake our two towns for one. They were so close to each other, separated only by the interstate. But locals understood the century-old fault lines between the black and white sides. With my car looking as janky as it did, it would draw unwanted attention, especially from Westman folks. And when white people got nervous, they called the cops. That's what happened a few weeks ago to Dante Maynard, a black kid from Shreveport. In the middle of August, during the last week of summer break, he was shot and killed in a gas station parking lot for no reason other than looking suspicious. The way I saw it, their fear was misplaced. Black kids were being killed by white people, and they were scared of us. But what I thought didn't matter. With darkness approaching, it didn't matter that I was regionally ranked tight end or that Marion was arguably the best quarterback the state had ever seen. It didn't matter that we had never been in trouble. All that mattered was that we'd be driving while black in a car with a cardboard window. So, yay, that's the beginning.
That was good. That was good. All right. So I'm going to get to the questions, and the book is about many things. It's about friendship, Black boy joy, Black girl magic, about the price of staying silent in the face of injustice. And it really sits at the intersection of several big and important social movements: activism, food justice. How did you first come up with the idea? Was there, any one thing?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me, there are a couple things. I mean, the past several years, 5 years, let's say, have been super racially charged more than I've seen. I know, like, I would hear stories from my parents about like their generation and stuff, but when I saw the Charlottesville march in Charlottesville, Virginia, with the white supremacists and alt-right, with tiki torches, and they killed a woman. I got so angry about that. And around that time, Colin Kaepernick had taken a knee, and I think the president at the time had said something like, "Get that son of a bee off the field," and it just like boiled my blood, because we see different types of protests or different types of statements all the time from sports figures. I mean, I can immediately think of like Tim Tebow taking a knee in the end zone all the time. And he was sort of praised for that. He was, promoting his religion and his like life philosophy and all of that. But taking a knee with Colin Kaepernick was all of a sudden like an assault on America. Instead of actually, and it was obviously an attempt to change the narrative, right? Like, he's not protesting systemic racism. Instead of actually like digging into what he says this protest is about, we're going to redefine it and say that it's about protesting the troops. And I thought that was really unfair. That's something that younger generations don't buy. But I do think that there's so much confusion out there that it was just important for me to have a story out there that represented something totally different, and also explored what could make a person actually dip their foot into activism and be activated themselves. So that is, a roundabout way of how I landed on the idea.
I think it's really great though. And I think you picked such powerful moments. I mean, as I explained to people in my world who are criticizing Colin Kaepernick, is, kneeling is never disrespectful. Like, that's what you do in church. Are you protesting, something holy and spiritual when you're kneeling there? No, of course not. And so it was so interesting how, that was just, the gesture was really twisted. And
it's such a natural thing for a football player to do. Some of the things that you do in the locker room before you go out on the field is you take a knee. And I tried to show that in the book. Their coach has them gather, take a knee, take a moment to collect yourselves and give like the game the reverence that it needs. So it's a very natural thing for Colin Kaepernick or any of the players to have done, is take a knee. And it's a sign of respect.
Yes. And your memory is correct as to what the former president said. I put that in my book, Unprecedented, because I was so absolutely astonished by
astonishing.
It's astonishing. I mean, I'm white, you're Black. We've had different experiences just by the nature of the skin that we were born in. And so for me, the idea that there are people who would carry tiki torches is like, what, really? And I'm sure it was less shocking for you, but, equally disturbing.
Yeah. I think it was it was shocking because I think I'm in a generation that's like, that's over. It's not, like, it's not like happening on a large scale. And then you see it at a big university on a large scale without people without hoods on. And it's like the stories that my grandmother used to tell. And like writing this book has opened up such a dialogue with my family about their own experiences with like police harassment or just racism, like, stuff going back to like when my dad was a kid and he got like punched at a whites only fountain. I mean, like, it's just, I guess it's not surprising because it is in the history of America, but that's what I thought it was, history. And it's not, it's just underneath the surface of some communities. And I think the best way, and of course we can get into this later, but the best way to eradicate that, or at least provide an alternate narrative, is through storytelling, is crawling inside a character's head like Russell and actually exploring activism and the other side of that story.
So tell me where Russell came from. I loved him. Where did he spring from?
Russell, so funny. Like, my character seems so real to me. I'm like, well, Russell's just Russell. But I drew from a couple people I know. I'm from Texas. I'm from Southeast Texas. I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana myself. And, my brother used to do cross country. He was on a team. I was briefly a medical trainer at my high school. And so I got to see like football up close. My husband, I haven't really said that word yet. I got married 2 weeks ago. So he played high school football in Alabama. And so I kind of just like mashed all of them together. And it was mostly like my brother. He used to come home. He would say things like, oh, my coach keeps like feeling my arms, like, like, am I weightlifting enough? And I think it's a weird area where Black athletes are really, I don't know, like, you feel like entitled to like their space and body. You kind of appraise them like a prized pig. I remember one coach from an opposing track and field team was upset that my brother had trained in Ghana for the summer. And he had said like something like, it's not fair that he's Black and he's been training in Africa. That's a crazy thing to say. And so like, I just kind of wanted to explore that headspace of like, what is it like for Russ? Like, he's depending on this to get him out of his small town, go to college, get the scholarship. But he's also being objectified in this really strange way. And he also has like something to say that could risk him. I just thought the tension's really there, but it's also like a story that is on a lot of athletes' hearts. So
I thought that was really powerful, and it, called to mind so many things. Hair, touching hair, the policing of hair, and so much of that comes from white supremacy's ownership of Black bodies. And kneeling is not what the white owner wants the Black body to do. And I think that's why it's so offensive for white supremacists.
And the argument that athletes should just, I think Laura Ingraham said this about, sorry, I'm saying her name, about LeBron James, like, shut up and dribble, like when he was using his platform to talk about racism. And that just smacks of racism, right? I mean, like, you have this industry of athletes and you're, trading them, you're watching them on TV, and like, you're getting such entertainment about, through their sport, but you don't want them to speak. And there's a popular argument that, well, they should be so grateful that they're being paid so much. And that smacks of racism too, because I'm sure they're grateful, but they also still have a voice and can exercise it. This is America. So yeah.
And no one ever says, oh, those CEOs should be grateful. That like there's certain people who can make a ton of money and deserve it, and others it's some sort of gift. It's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about setting. You're from Southeast Texas. Your husband also grew up in the South. Do you think this story would have played out differently, say, in Seattle or another part of the country? And did you know that the Garfield players kneeled?
I didn't know that. Okay, they're right down the street. No, I didn't, but that doesn't surprise me. I'd say Seattle is the only place where I've lived where I'd say, okay, this might be an exception. But like, broad strokes, I do think kneeling was when I was writing this book, when I started this a couple of years ago, generally like taboo, don't do it, it's against the rules. Now I know the NFL has changed their guidance on that, and so they will allow it. They're also they put out like a press release a couple weeks ago about also playing like the NAACP national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, at certain games. I'm not sure what's going on there. I think they're more open to it, but I do think, generally speaking, nationally, making a statement about systemic racism is problematic everywhere. And it's particularly problematic in the South. That history is really suppressed. I mean, I have like 4 degrees. Okay. I didn't know who James Baldwin was until law school. We're really not exploring activism or what's the critical race theory that's like a big flashpoint right now, which is really interesting because the teacher, Miss J, in this book is like, very much on like critical race theory and like exploring your own notions of patriotism. But yeah, I do think that particularly in the South, this is an issue, even for a Black character. His family, his coach is Black. I also wanted to explore in this book, it is not just because you're Black doesn't mean you're automatically on board with kneeling, and there are different takes on that.
Yeah, there is no one way to be any identity element. Here's a little Seattle Black history. I think it's the first or second Black person to live in Washington State was a man named William Gross. He lived in the Central District, our neighborhood. Yeah. And he was an incredibly successful businessman. He bought 10 acres in the Central District, and that became Seattle's historic Black community. Why? Because of racial redlining. His house still stands, and there's a tiny little park in his honor, but I would love for more people to know about him. He was an incredible man, 6'4", and also super, super generous. He had a restaurant called the Yellow House. He sold it. 4 years later, it burned in the Great Seattle Fire, and he gave the person who bought it his money back, which is a pretty beautiful thing to do.
Wow.
Anyway, so he was just a fascinating character, and I didn't know anything about him until I wrote The Game of Love and Death, and I kind of took
What's his name again?
William Gross, Grose. And the Seattle Times has only written something that like mentioned his wife. So there's this untapped history. Anyway, not that you need any additional book ideas, my friend. Okay, football. The season starts for the Seahawks on Sunday. Are you a huge football fan? Why did you choose football?
Okay, so football just seemed like the natural way to tell this story. I really was inspired by Colin Kaepernick. I know basketball has been really active in that, but it almost seemed like because basketball has been more accepting of kneeling and social activism, that I did want to keep it in that football space, because yeah, that's where it all started. Am I a huge football fan? I have become a huge football fan. I didn't really know a lot about football. Like, I'll go to a Super Bowl party. I will throw down on a halftime show. But I didn't know much about the mechanics. I would just kind of cheer when other people cheered. So I actually, Jonathan really schooled me a lot on football and on like technicalities and when do you throw a flat, all of those stuff. Like, what is offsides? I still don't really get it, but like, like, how do you tell that kind of stuff? And I watched a show on Netflix called Last Chance U, which if you haven't seen it, it's incredible. It's about football players who have dropped out or fallen out of their D1 scholarships, and they're in this junior community football league trying to get a scholarship and trying to rise up into a D1 program again. And it really kind of takes you on the field. I mean, the camera's like right in there. So I am an emerging football fan, let's say. Are you a football fan?
No, but I do like it. I love Friday Night Lights. And so when I read Neil, I'm like, oh, this is like Friday Night Lights, but with Black Lives Matter.
So Friday Night Lights, one of my favorite movies, definitely. But it, what makes it interesting, and I love Remember the Titans.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, and so I what makes these stories really great is that they include teammates being on the field and the pressure that these kids feel around the game and around the politics of the game. So I'd say this is a football book. I mean, there's a football literally on the cover of the book, but it's more than that, and that's the kind of story that I really love.
It's because you also made Russ a really smart, really good student. Now that I know was that your own voices for genius.
Yes. It was really important for me to make Russ more than a football player. I think a lot of times we see a lot of jock stereotypes of oh, all they can do is football, and this really is his only chance of getting out of Monroe, and it's not. I mean, he's a dynamic person. He's doing his schoolwork. His mom is a substitute teacher, and so she's obviously instilled this love of learning in him, and he's really naturally good in English class. And it's not something that necessarily he brags about. This is also sort of taken from my brother, who would not go out there and be like, I set the curve, guys. But he was coming home and bringing, really strong grades, and also, being part of a team. So, and also I really did want to bring I think smart Black men with dynamic friendships and relationships That's something that I don't see in a lot of literature. There's more out there than there was when I was a kid or when I was growing up watching TV, how they would kind of be these static characters that didn't really have substance. And so I really wanted to have Russ like have like this like writer inside of him just waiting to come out. Yeah.
There's a middle grade novel by Olubemisola Rude Perkovich called It Doesn't Take a Genius. And so for younger readers, if you want to read about a really, really smart Black boy, that is a good book. And it is true. I mean, we have so many received notions of who is what and what people are supposed to be like. And, you know, every person, what is it? The Ted Lasso quote, every person is a different person. So
I just started watching that.
Oh, so good.
So
I
fun.
have a really good recipe for the Ted Lasso cookies. So when you get to that part,
Okay.
I have a little bit of a cookie obsession. So
yeah. Oh, I was thinking today, like, I really want to like put out a recipe for Russ's mama's meatloaf and cornbread that's in the book and just like do book clubs and just like have meatloaf and cornbread all the time. So the recipe idea kind of.
I think that you should definitely do that. And yes, I will make both of those things.
Yay.
Okay, so let's shift gears just a tiny bit and get into your wild and woolly path to writing. You studied German literature, you weirdo. You went to law school, you genius. You went to biz school. You worked as a consultant, and now you're writing these wonderful books. How did that happen?
How did that happen, Martha? I wrote this like really rambly post on Instagram yesterday of just like, it feels like an out of body experience, like having a book on the shelves and signing it at my old workplace where I used to sell books. You know, I'd say, yeah, I was always a crazy avid reader. My mom would take me to the bookstore like once a week, and I would have a stack of like 15 books and be like, I need every single one of these. She actually brought me a letter that I wrote her about increasing my allowance because I need more books and books will make me smarter. And I think I was probably 8 years old when I wrote it, judging by the handwriting. Which hasn't improved much because of computers. But, you know, and she would limit my books to 8. So that's like 8 books a week. And I would just burn through them. And I did study German literature at Duke. And I remember my dad, sophomore year, he was like, this can't be your primary major. This isn't a real major. What are you going to do with this? And I told him, well, I was thinking I'm going to get my MFA in creative writing. And he was like, no. And so my other major, my other bachelor's, my primary major is political science. And, you know, that was a constant tension of like, where am I going to go to grad school? I recognize the privilege of just being able to go to grad school. Very awesome opportunity. I got, you know, while I was applying to writing programs, they were like, just take the LSAT. And, you know, I got a scholarship to law school. And so it's like, it's a dream deferred. But, you know, I will just say this one quick anecdote. My first semester, my first legal writing course in law school, my professor was handing out papers, and she said, Candace, just come to my office. And I went to her office during office hours, and she said, this is like beautiful. It reads like it was a legal memorandum. And she was like, it reads like a story, and it's like got this flow. But the reason why I'm giving you a C on this is because that's not what we do in law school. And so I always had like, like this parallel track in my life where I was writing the legal way, writing the business school way, not a whole lot of writing in business school, but I was always writing another story. And I started a story in law school, and I just didn't fit. It took me years to develop it. And years later, I'm at this consulting firm. I'm ostensibly successful. And I got into this writer's workshop in Austin, this MFA style workshop by S. Kirk Walsh. And I could not actually do both of them. So I had to choose between working 14-hour days or writing. And I took a big risk. And I know my parents are still kind of cringing over it, but I did quit my job to finish that workshop. Yeah.
Well, I'd say that it paid off, my friend. You had, okay, so this is sort of your debut and sort of not, because you also had another novel, Julie and the Phantoms. Whatever happens, it came out a few weeks back, you know, as novels just do.
Sure.
So what's that one about? And how did that happen? And there's a Netflix show, and
yes.
Can I still like, you know, hold the hem of your dress when you're famous?
Oh man. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've been telling people I gotta lower your expectations. Still, you know, still candy from the block. But yeah, the Julie and the Phantom. So this is my debut. I started I've been working on this book for 3 years this November. And you know, because of pandemic times and like scheduling, and also this Julie and the Phantoms book was like super fast track. I actually like signed this Julie and the Phantoms deal right when I was doing last round edits for Neil, but it came out before Neil. So, you know, when Netflix wants something done, they want something done. And for those of you who are listening, I'm sure there are writers out there and non-writers. The world of publishing is a lot of hurry up and wait. And so I never dreamed that the Julie and the Phantoms novel was going to pub before this one, but it is a so I joined the Julie and the Phantoms team when it was in post-production. So they'd already filmed the show, but it wasn't out on Netflix, and they were looking to expand these characters' lives, especially some of the characters who appear in the show, but you don't really know about them. You know, one of them is a Black girl character, and she is wonderful in the show, but she's not fully realized. And so that was really, you know, really fun to do, and also super satisfying, like giving like a Black girl like all of the things and characteristics that she deserves. And yeah, so that's expanding.
Okay, so what's it about though? Tell us, like.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it happens right after the Julie finds 3 ghosts in her mom's old studio, which is a converted garage on the side of her house. And they can only be seen when they play music together. And Julie hasn't played music since her mom died, but it's all about her finding her voice, finding her joy again, playing this music, and having these friends who seem imaginary when she's like talking to nothing, but like she's actually seeing her ghost. She's the only one who can see them without playing music. And so the book picks up right after they do their big show at the Orpheum Theater in Los Angeles. And they're really riding this high. And all of a sudden, besides being able to see them, she can touch them. And so they are reminiscing about their, you know, this is the best day ever. When was the last time we had a best day? And so it really tracks all of these characters. Best day ever. For Luke, it was his final day as a living human, which sounds morbid, but like it was a pretty great day. I made it like super fantastic day. And for Julie, it was a day that she got to spend with her mom before she was declared super sick. And they do like this really cool duet at the end. I got to write some original songs that Kenny Ortega had to approve himself. And my mom actually helped me write that mother-daughter song at the end of the book. So it's pretty special.
Oh, that's amazing. So Kenny Ortega, was he the director? I know he used to be a choreographer, and he did High School Musical.
High School Musical. I am living the dream of my 15-year-old self. Oh my goodness. So Kenny Ortega is like the writer, director, and yes, he is a choreographer. I'm not sure if he choreographed this show, but he made High School Musical, The Descendants on Disney, and Hocus Pocus.
No way. Okay. So you're in excellent company, aren't you?
I think so. I guess so. It's been a really wild ride. I feel like it was just, I made this 5-year plan when I quit my job of like having a book published. And I remember talking to other authors, like, you should really like manage your expectations. And it's 5.5 years today. And it's been pretty wild.
Well, so I'm going to shoot just a couple of questions at you, and then we'll turn it over to our guests. So like, we'll just do this rapid fire. Authors who've influenced you most.
Oof. Okay. So V.E. Schwab, Victoria Schwab. She's really cool. And I know that sounds like an odd reference, because Neil is like a YA contemporary. But when I'm not, I do think that there is kind of a Southern Gothic vibe. There's the ghost of Dante Maynard. There's the Dante's shadow that kind of looms over the whole story. It's in the South, which is a little bit quirkier than other places in the country. At least I think so, having grown up there. So like when I'm not writing contemporary novels, I'm writing really creepy fiction. I think Victoria Schwab does such a masterful job at that. And then she also got her start writing some books for Scholastic, and then did middle grade for Scholastic and another publisher, and then YA, and then adult. And I've done a middle grade with Scholastic and a young adult. No plans for adult yet, but I just think that she has such a fantastic voice, and the way that she strings together her prose. It's really, I really, really admire her.
Yeah. I think she's pretty brills. Okay. What are you reading that you wish everybody would pick up?
Okay. So shout out to my writing group, my critique group. They're amazing. And they're all like doing crazy things. So a lot of them have written short stories in this anthology, this YA anthology called Foreshadow. So I would pick that up. And then, right now I'm reading Maya Prasad's manuscript. It's not out yet. She's got like 4 projects coming out, no big deal. I have Rachel Lynn Solomon's Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. I haven't started it, but I also met Rachel at your house, and she's also a huge inspiration and has just provided so much guidance to me.
It's fantastic. You're going to love that book. It's
yes,
really good.
I love the way she writes. And I remember when I moved to Seattle, I'd be like, I'm never gonna run into her, but wouldn't that be cool? And it turns out the writing community here is amazing and super available. And then the last book that I'm reading Tigers Not Daughters, about 4 sisters. I love books with sisters and siblings and a little family drama. And one of them ends up, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, it's like the premise of the book. One of them dies by falling out of the window, and then, there's just like a lot of stuff that ensues, and it includes a haunting, which I also just love creepy books, i.e. V.E. Schwab. And I'm actually doing a panel discussion with Samantha Mabry, the writer of Tigers Not Daughters, on Saturday at the Writers League of Texas. We're doing a panel discussion on writing young adult fiction and why we do it. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, here's my last question. What's next for you?
Okay, so I have 2 projects, possibly 3, but I need to slow down. I am writing this really fun, creepy witch story about Black witches in South Carolina. I don't have a pub date for that. Publishing's weird. Like, I don't know what I can announce and what I can't, but I do have one deal that as soon as they give me the green light, I will announce. It's like a treasure hunt book. Also in the South, and it's like everything goes wrong sort of book, but it's also like the treasure hunt. It has a lot of Black history woven into it, a lot of like stories of displacement, things that I think would be so cool for kids to know about and learn about while they're still in high school. Things that I wish I'd known when I was in high school. So those are my 2 projects.
That sounds fantastic. All right. Now we get to have Allie come and moderate some questions. If
Allie
we
with the questions.
She's back with the questions.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm seeing a question here. Audience members, now is the time. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A. We would absolutely love to hear from you. And we are getting to the end of our evening. So the fire is lit. Go for it. So I have a question here from Dr. Glendale Presley. I hope that I said your name right. I apologize if I screwed it up. It says, I love this book. I could not stop reading. I am a teacher and interested in introducing this to my intensive reading class. I love the themes, and I'm curious about the character Dave. What was your thinking on Dave's role in the book?
Yes, Dave. Oh man. Okay, so my thinking behind it. So Dave goes to the Central Community College near their school in the book, and he is a journalism major, and he is also an activist. And my feeling behind Dave was, one, I wanted to give a shout out to to community colleges. Dave's a really bright person. And I just wanted to kind of dispel, I think that there are some stereotypes. I love turning stereotypes on their heads. And so Dave is like this really great guy who is at the community college, and he helps print out some flyers. I won't say anything more about it because it kind of spoils the story. I don't know what I could say about it, but I wanted to show a really educated Black man again, and someone for Russ to look up to because he is also interested in journalism. And so he gets to see activism and journalism in action. And I feel like, you get to see that and you think, okay, it's possible, right? And I did have this whole backstory about Dave. He was a former basketball player or football player or something. I had to cut it out for length purposes, but he was a fully formed human. But that's how editing goes. Yeah.
So I have a question here from Hillary that says, what was the hardest part about writing Neil? If you were I'm assuming this HS stands for high school. Okay.
I think so.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. In a high school passionate book club, what would you hope we would discuss?
Oh man. Hardest part about writing Neil. So I actually wrote the latter half of Neil during the Seattle protests last summer. And I do not live far from Cap Hill, where things got really heated, and our like police department was disproportionately like violent, I'd say. There for weeks, maybe a solid month, like we would just hear like helicopters circling over our house. At night we'd hear like flash grenades and like people screaming, and like it's like
Remember the curfews? I mean, we had curfews.
yeah, I mean there was a curfew, right? But like people were not following the curfew, and I think people were obviously out there marching in solidarity with George Floyd. I was out there, not at night though, because things got really scary. But writing, Black people deal with racism all the time, but like we don't dwell on it. And so like, because it would make you go crazy. And so being submerged in like a book about Black Lives Matter and about protest while right down the street during a really heated string of protests was like, I felt like I was super submerged in that subject matter too much, and it was hard for me to unplug. I ultimately think it made those final chapters more definitely more real. I mean, I really drew on my own personal experience for those protest chapters. But I think the hardest part in writing in general is finding a space to like separate a little bit, let it breathe, and then kind of get to come back. And the second part of that was, if you were in high school in a passionate book club, I love that the book club's passionate, what would you hope we would discuss? Well, I'd say I really love Miss J's prompts. I hope that you would discuss If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. I hope you would talk about Maya Angelou and Still I Rise. She actually was like she spoke on my first day of classes at when I was a freshman at Duke. She did that every single year. And she's amazing. I actually got to meet her. And I think talking about Black literature is something we talk about, the classics and the greats, and but they're missing some colors there. So I think incorporating that, specifically about the book, what you should discuss, I think discussing the different takes on kneeling is a really interesting idea, where Russ's dad's insecurity about protest and about drawing attention to yourself, where does that come from? There are some really interesting perspectives from the players. From Marion is against protest, and he's the one who's really dealing with a lot of that. I think really digging into those motivations, and also the insidious way that kind of racism kind of traps you in a sunken place, is something that I really wanted to discuss. I think you should discuss Gabby and food justice. I mean, her dad owns a produce delivery service, and it's in a food desert where there aren't a lot of ways to get vegetables, and why does that happen in lower income and Black neighborhoods and with people of color more than in white neighborhoods and affluent neighborhoods, and what does that affect on healthcare? I mean, I could go on, but that's a good start.
That was such a good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's see. We have just a couple of minutes left. So last chance, folks, if you've got questions, let's hear them. In the meantime, I would love to know, if not YA contemporary, what genre would you love to hop into?
Oh, I'm glad. I really enjoy, and I don't think this is a real genre right now, or my agent says it's like very genre bendy. She likes to call my fiction weird fiction. But I really like Southern Gothics. That's like my super big passion of having something set in the South and really highlighting like some grotesque Southern characters and expressions that people in the South can see every day. But also like there's also an element of the fantastic that also highlights the ridiculousness of the situation or some historical wrong. So a haunted house is another story. That was the first book that I wrote. And I need to, like, as a published author now, it definitely needs some work. But I love a good haunted house. I love a ghost. I love witches. I love speculative fiction. You know, this is kind of writing the line of magical realism a little bit. So I would say, if not, and these stories, I do still love to keep them contemporary. So no high fantasy for me as of yet. I still like to have at least 1 foot grounded in our world, and then kind of dig into the deep of history or magic or something like that. And that's what I'm currently writing right now. So I'm in it. I'm all for it.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Thanks, Allie.
All righty. So I'm looking at the time and we are at the end of our evening. So it's about time to call it a night, but I'm just going to take this last moment to say a huge, huge thank you to both of you for being here. It has been such an absolute delight. Candace, I am so excited to have you here on the author side of the event and to see books on shelves. It's so wonderful. To all of our audience members, thank you so for turning out. We are so happy to have you here. If you would like to get copies of the books, go ahead and follow those links. I left them in the chat. Go ahead and take this moment to scroll up and track those down. Of course, if you are local, we would absolutely love to see you. Come on in. If you're not local, let us know what you thought of this event on any of the social media platforms. We always love to hear from you. And with that, Martha and Candace, one more huge, huge thank you for being here. And I think it is time for some awkward waving.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you so much.
Right.
Thanks, Denise. I'm sorry I don't get to type to you, but thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you.